Africa's Victoria Falls, the largest curtain of falling water in the world, twice the size of Niagara. Below the falls, the Zambezi River flows through unexplored jungle between Zambia and Zimbabwe. Among the teeming wildlife are crocodiles, dangerous for any expedition, and hippos, wading in places where the unnavigated river is calm. It was 1855 when Dr. David Livingstone stopped his canoe at the lip of Victoria Falls. And what he saw made him turn back. The boiling pot below, where the river begins a tortuous course through narrow gorges. Today, for the first time, an expedition tries to go beyond where Dr. Livingstone left off. I'm Levar Burton. Explaining the gorges to us is a geologist from the University of Zambia, Dennis Huckabee.
This gorge that you see here is formed out of solid basalt, and it's a shrinkage channel or a shrinkage crack which filled up with unconsolidated material, loose material, which the river scoured out.
Now, basalt is a rock?
Basalt is lava, which is solidified. Amazing.
First, we got a taste of the more than 200 major rapids that rage for 85 miles to Lake Kariba. Before the expedition began, we had the honor of attending a Zambian festival celebrating this unique expedition. The festival was filled with living symbols of African tradition, dress, songs, and dances of a deeply rooted culture. On hand for the ceremony was Zambia's president, the Honorable Dr. Kenneth Kaunda.
Today, a group of adventurous explorers from Sobek expeditions has come to the banks of the great Zambezi River to continue Livingstone's journey down the river. While Livingstone and many others have navigated Zambezi above the falls, no one has attempted the trip downstream from the falls until today. This is therefore a historic occasion. I would like to extend a very warm welcome on behalf of the party, its government, the people of Zambia, and on my own behalf to the members of the Sobek expeditions and representatives of ABC Television and the National Geographic magazine to our country. Among our honored guests today is a black American, Mr. Levar Burton. Stand up again. It is now my greatest pleasure, indeed honor, to launch expedition.
And so we began, a journey into a strange, unexplored region on a river that had never been navigated. Last time we'd do this because it wasn't so easy with all the rocks. But our raft was too heavily manned to take the risk. Not so for the kayakers. In the white kayak, Doug Tompkins started off fine, but he came too close to the side and suddenly found himself flipping over. He kept trying to come back upright by attempting an Eskimo roll. One of the oar boats tried to make it too. They were doing okay, but then, before they knew it, they were swept to one side and hit the wall. Between each set of rapids, there was a stretch of calm water, giving us a chance to drift and keep ourselves cool from the temperatures of over 90 degrees. I was amazed at all the exotic African wildlife on shore, like the baboons that seemed oblivious to us.
Well, Levar, you've had a pretty good look at what we do by now. What do you think of the sport of rafting?
Well, there's a lot more involved than I ever thought there was. I mean, with the walking up and down the rocks and the portaging and all of that, It's just not your cruise down the Swanee River. Our tranquility was quickly broken by a huge boiling rapid. It swept us down as if we were a toy and right into a rock. But the most dangerous rapid was just ahead of us.
When I found out how
Below the falls, the Zambezi River is compressed into a series of narrow, steep gorges. Until the year before, when Zimbabwe became independent, guerrilla fighting here would have prevented our trip. Our expedition was using inflatable boats carrying supplies and camping gear. Because of their agility in big rapids, kayakers preceded us down the river. The kayakers would act as safety men for the rest of us. Among them was Newsom Holmes in the orange boat. I was lucky to be with a team of veteran whitewater adventurers. I was in the only boat using paddles instead of oars, and all of a sudden, we were faced with our first big test. Using paddles required more work, but was also a much more exciting way to go down the river. The Zambezi was already showing us some of its fearsome power. At times like this, with everything happening so fast, your entire concentration is focused. Behind us was one of the oarboats. In calm water, we had a chance to catch our breath. The Zambezi drops an average of 14 feet per mile, 2 feet more than the Colorado River. So I knew the breather wouldn't last long. And it didn't. After several rapids giving us no trouble, we came to one so terrifying that we pulled over. Our captain, David Shore, wanted to scout it.
Well, the problem is that that first hole right there is stopped water below it. And once you get in that trough, you can surf either way. You've got a rap rock right here that we're risking. And, you know, that, if I were to do this run today, what I was looking at from above was getting to the far right, busting into the eddy, turning around, and then powering out this way as we came in.
Away from the wall.
Away from the wall.
What about that hole, Dave, right there?
Well, what we would have done, it's pretty hard to paddle like this, but there's a diagonal wave right there that would surface out into the river. It's not impossible, but it's just...
Bottom line is, for a first day, it's not worth it, the thrill.
That's right.
So we started portaging around the dangerous spot. I hope... From the shore, we watched one of the oarboats go through the next big set of rapids. They really got tossed around. So we watched and then talked over our strategy.
We're going to take this rapid on the right side down this chute here. Now, what you just saw, that last boat going in the hole, should not happen to us. We're going to start out far enough in the river that we have momentum and power to come in, catch these eddies on the right. You see that pointed rock over there with the moss on the top of it? It's triangular. Yeah. We want to just barely miss that with the boat. So you've got to gauge your strokes as we're coming into the power. As long as we stay in this chute, frontwards or backwards, we're okay.
But it's all right to go through backwards.
Backwards or forwards, it's all the same. It's fine to go through backwards as long as we're straight.
Right. We want to keep straight all through this tongue here and right straight down that last tongue right there, right?
Well, we want to
Be right.
keep straight when we start going through holes, but we'll risk being sideways because that's the position we can move over in. I'm more concerned with being to the right side as far as possible. We cannot be too far right once we start getting into that broken water down there.
As we started off, I began to understand why the Zambezi River had never been attempted. We were pulled into the rapid, and I could see that we weren't taking the line we just talked about. No matter how hard we paddled, we were losing control. Before I knew it, two of us were overboard, myself and Grant Rogers. Now all the previous instructions were coming back to me. But suddenly, I got hit by the raft, driven under for what seemed like an eternity. I thought to myself, where's Grant? Where is he? Somewhere in that churning water. I tried to keep my head up to look for him. I didn't know it, but he had had the wind knocked out of him. He was hurt and in danger of being swept into the jagged rocks. Once again, I was engulfed by a wave, sucked under and tossed around. Grant was still trying to catch his breath and holding on to the paddle for his life. He finally got to the raft and almost to safety. As he was being pulled in, an Army helicopter monitoring our progress was on its way, hopefully not too late. I was still being swept downriver. It was obvious that Grant would need medical treatment. The helicopter would get him to a hospital. Newsom was trying desperately to get to me. Grant was safe, but he still needed medical help. He'd come up against the full force of the Zambezi River, and it was a miracle that he hadn't been killed. Somehow, I grabbed the back end of the kayak, and the Army helicopter arrived. Everything was fine until we hit that hole there. I think I was leading out, trying to catch a wave, and just went off balance. The whole left side of the boat just went down, and the next thing I knew, I was in the water. The only real scary part was right in here in these rapids. I was going down with my feet first, like you guys said. It was really difficult to breathe, so I did what you also said, turned around and grabbed a breath, and then floated down. And then, of course, Newsom and Doug were down there in the kayaks to pick me up. All in all, it was, I don't want to do that anymore. I'd rather stay in the boat from now on. In the hospital, Grant was just happy to be alive.
Well, in the paddle boat, you know, we had a little lecture ahead of time before we attempted this rapids. And as we came around the bend, I thought we were a little bit too far out, Joe. And, but the waves that hit, they were tremendous. It was a tremendous wave. But anyway, and I found myself in the water. First, I thought the raft had capsized because I was underneath the raft. But then I felt that it had a smooth bottom, so I knew I was out. I didn't know Levar had gone out at all. And then we went down this chute. Appeared to be a chute. I got myself in position good. I had my legs out in front of me, and I could see a big hole coming up. And then I hit that thing. I've never experienced any pain like that in my life. And of course, the problem was that as soon as that hit, which we found out later fractured 3 of my ribs, it took all the air away from me, and trying to get up, I couldn't get my breath. So it was a very difficult situation. I kind of thought that maybe Dr. Livingston was right. Stay above the falls and not below.
The following day, Dave and I went out and scouted the next big rapid from the shore. There seemed to be no let-up. We were facing another dangerous section of narrow, fierce white water. By this time, we'd all developed some pretty good teamwork. But that didn't stop us from having our moments. We hit what seemed like a wall. Behind us came another ore raft, possibly in trouble. Another calm spot, as if a reward for getting through.
Had a chance now to see something of Zambia and Zimbabwe, you and a few other places. What are your impressions in general of Africa?
Well, earlier in this trip, I was in northwestern Africa, up in Mauritania, and then we went to Senegal, and then we went all the way to the east to Djibouti, and then into Kenya. And that was, we were in famine-devastated Africa, and that was like night and day as compared to this. There was a lot of hunger, not starvation actually, but a lot of hunger. There's a large segment of the population that's in dire need of food. This, I mean, here we are on the Zimbabwean, Zambian border. These countries have been in conflict for a while. Now they're at peace, and especially in this case, I mean, they really came together to make this expedition happen. I didn't see any of that in the first part of my first trip to Africa. Just when I thought we were finally through all the big rapids, we found ourselves about to fly again. When Doug hit that first rough spot, he simply disappeared. He'd slammed into a big wave and flipped out of his kayak. Luckily, Newsom was there and came to the rescue. In an oarboat by himself, John Yost started off on just the right line. Or so it seemed. Once again, the Zambezi had one of us in trouble. As the Army helicopter moved in, Newsom was there in his kayak. He had been swept sideways into the wave. The broad wall of water had flipped him over, dumping him out. The empty raft continued downriver without him. Finally, we could see the end of the rapids. At long last, the Zambezi turned tranquil, finishing its 85-mile course toward a wide valley flooded by the waters of Lake Kariba. A truly remarkable